The first question, let's start with new European leadership. So Europe just appointed a new head of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Other important roles went to Spanish representative Josep Borrell, then Belgian one, Mr. Charles Michel. So they are all from Western Europe. And Central Europe this time left without its representatives in European leadership. In your opinion, are there any concerns that this may lead to losing the influence of Central European countries inside of the EU?
I don't think so. If you look at the economic performance, for example, very recently you can see that the Central European countries perform a much higher growth rate than the European average. We have played a major role in creating this personal outset, let's put it this way, of the future leaders. We were definitely against the nomination of the two Spitzenkandidaten from the two biggest party groups. We are happy with this decision. We are happy with the fact that Ursula von der Leyen has won the vote in the European Parliament. She definitely does have a very good understanding of Central Europe. She has always shown trust and respect towards our region. So I think that we Central Europeans can be happy with her being appointed.
But there were two candidates from Bulgaria, from Eastern European countries. In your opinion, why they did not make it?
Well, actually, in order to be on the final roster, there's a series of compromises. And now the series of compromises led to such a personal configuration.
Talking about compromises, actually, another important organization in Europe is Council of Europe, and PACE in June decided to return Russia. It was someone called it compromise, someone called it shame. Depends but it was really important voting, really important decision. But Hungary did not vote. Why?
Well, actually, it was the decision of the members of our delegation, and you know, parliamentarians are independent from the government itself. What I can tell you about Russia's return, generally from the perspective of the government, is the following: that you know, we Central Europeans, like you Ukrainians, we have a very clear understanding of the consequences we can draw from our history. And these consequences are, or one of these consequences is that whenever there was a conflict between East and West, we Central Europeans always lost. That's a historic fact. So we are in favor of dialogue. We are in favor of discussion. And Council of Europe is basically one of the last platforms. We can take into consideration OSCE as well. So these are the last two platforms where where the opportunity of discussion between East and West is given. So we are always in favor of discussing things. We are always in favor of dialogue, and we hope that this dialogue will lead to a situation where East and West can work together on a basis of number one, mutual respect, and number two, respect towards all international regulations. We don't know whether this is going to be the case in the future. Now the situation is much worse than that, and one might say it's not very realistic that I speak about such kind of a wish of ours, but we can hope for the best.
Yet many politicians, media said that this decision, returning Russia, was a big shame because PACE is actually an organization that has to defend the democracy and rule of law, and Russia constantly breaks and has been neglecting rule of law for past 5 years.
Well, I think dialogue about that is very important. And if you don't have a platform for a dialogue, then it leads nowhere. So I don't think that that such kind of a decision to allow the Russians to take part in the work of the Council of Europe could be taken into consideration as a judgment of their policies, whether they are positive or negative. You know, so I think this decision was a technical one to recreate a platform for discussion, and it has no no evaluation of the Russian internal politics.
Well, there was a discussion before, even without participating Russian PACE.
Sorry?
There was a discussion before, even without Russian participating in PACE. So what's the issue there?
Yeah, but if you don't have all stakeholders or all participants at the table, then the outcome of the dialogue will be very limited. Of course, having everybody around the table is not a guarantee that there will be a positive outcome, but at least you have a hope for that.
There are also concerns that this decision actually could become the first step towards lifting sanctions like of the EU against Russia. And you also mentioned, while in St. Petersburg, you mentioned that probably Europe has to reconsider this issue. So what's the Hungarian position on sanctions against Russia?
Look, I don't think that there would be any kind of connection between the decision of the Council of Europe and the sanction regime introduced by European Union. Now about the sanctions. I definitely do think that the impact of the sanctions should be evaluated. What we see is that there's a big bunch of hypocrisy in this regard. Look at the last figures. Look at the figures of trade between France and Russia, for example. Trade between France and Russia has increased by 45% during the last 2 years under sanction regime. Trade between Germany and Russia has increased by 29% during the last 2 years under sanction regime. We Central European countries lost a lot. Only us, Hungary, we lost more than $8 billion of export opportunities since the sanctions have been in place. So there's a big hypocrisy in this regard, number one. And number two, if you look at the results or outcome of the sanctions, I think we should raise the question whether these sanctions have reached their goals, either economically or politically speaking. So we don't want more than just put this on the agenda in an open way, and debate all aspects of the sanctions. We were always supporting the unanimity of the European Union to be maintained in this respect. We never vetoed the sanctions. We were always in favor of the decision by the unity. So, but when it comes to the impacts of the sanctions, and when it comes to these details, how trade between Western European countries and Russia look like in the last years, that should be taken into consideration in an honest way. So no hypocrisy, no political correctness.
But well, that's a political issue as well, because like sanctions were imposed because Russia occupied Crimea, attacked Ukraine, and some European countries, well, your close allies like Poland or Baltic states, they feel danger, from Russia. So, and someone say that, okay, you may say, or like other people say that Russia sanctions don't work, but maybe they don't work because they're not strong enough.
That's why we have never vetoed the sanctions. We were always in favor of the European unity in this regard, and we have always stood up and speak up for the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine. We have made many positive gestures, regardless of the fact that the rights of the Hungarians were violated quite many times. We have always expressed our solidarity in practical terms as well. Since 2013, Hungary is delivering gas to Ukraine on a reverse flow basis, although it's very risky for us since we get 100% of our imported gas from Russia. We have given treatment to 37 Ukrainian troops who have been injured in the war. And this year we're gonna provide such kind of treatment for 20 additional troops. So far there were 2,200 Ukrainian kids since 2016 having holidays in Hungary, expenses covered by the Hungarian state, whose parents have been involved in the fights in the east. So we have made our best to support Ukraine in this regard.
But still, if there is a question about the sanctions, lifting the sanctions, if it's on the table, what will be Hungarian vote?
Well, the question is never to lift the sanctions. The question is to roll on the sanctions. And we have never vetoed so far. And I think this is a very clear clear answer to your question. We have
So,
never
like,
vetoed.
no changes for this matter.
We, I don't see any endeavors on behalf of the big countries in the European Union to change that. And since the big countries will not change it, I don't think there will be a change.
Talking about Ukrainian-Hungarian relations, recently in Toronto, you said that Zelensky is a new hope for Hungary. What kind of hope, like hope for what? And were there any contacts between your administrations yet?
Yeah. Well, look, unfortunately, the Hungarian-Ukrainian relationship is not in its best form ever, unfortunately.
That's true.
Unfortunately. Maybe this is not the most sophisticated sentence you ever heard from someone who deals with diplomacy, but it's much better to be in a good relationship with the neighbors than being in a bad relationship. And we always put a lot of emphasis on that. And we used to have a good relationship with Ukraine. And I really do hope that we can return to that. And it's very obvious where this relationship was diverted to a bad track. There are two pieces of legislation in Ukraine in place which were very, very painful for us. One law on education and the other one the law on using minority languages. These definitely take away rights from the Hungarians which have been there so far. So taking away already existing rights is against all international regulations. Now, President Zelensky made some very encouraging statements about the will to enhance, to improve the bilateral relationship between Hungary and Ukraine. The two presidents have already met because as a signal of trust and a signal of will for a good relationship, the Hungarian president was one of the 5 to show up on the inauguration of your president. So the two presidents had a good meeting, encouraging statements from your president, although we understand that in order to deliver, in order actions to follow the words, he needs a good outcome from his perspective on the national elections to take place this weekend. So we hope that the outcome of elections will help the bilateral relationship to improve, and we hope that the elections will give a political stability for your country. Because, having strong and stable neighbors is much better than the other way around.
Well, you mentioned about the president, like meetings between the president, but still a decision maker is Mr. Orban in Hungary. So were there any contacts between, or what are you expecting for it?
Yeah, we would like to have a meeting between the president and the prime minister, obviously. But we understand we have to wait until the national elections to be held and the new government and the new, let's say, political majority or parliamentary majority to be formed. So we are happy to have the meeting anytime. We definitely will find a suitable date for both parties. And I'm pretty sure, knowing the Hungarian Prime Minister, since I've been working for him and with him for a very long time now, I'm pretty sure that they will find a solution because both seem to me very pragmatic.
Well, regarding the elections, actually, you say that you hope for improvement of the relations, but now, honestly, if we look at it, there is a new brewing conflict regarding Hungarian involvement in Ukrainian electoral campaign, which has been, this question has been raised like many times in recent days. So what we see, Mr. Orban meets with Ukrainian MP, posting like photo with his electoral slogan. Then we see councils taking part in meeting with voters with this MP. Then 4 visits of of high officials, including you, to Transcarpathia in only the past week, which is really often even for Hungary, which supports Transcarpathia. So Ukraine has repeatedly said that these actions for Ukraine is unacceptable. And today, Ukrainian Vice Prime Minister said that your visit, like other visits too, were, quote, rude disrespect of Ukrainian law. So how do you think, are these actions help to build the dialogue with Ukraine?
Look, you shouldn't be independent from reality. And politics should not be independent from reality either. To be honest, I don't really understand. I don't really understand these kind of reactions on behalf of the Ukrainian political elite. if any leaders of neighboring countries come to Hungary to get in contact with their minorities living on the territory of Hungary, we are happy with that. No complaints. So if an Ukrainian leader comes to Hungary and meets the Ukrainian minority, we consider it as natural. No, but we don't have a problem with that either. So we consider it natural. Serbs didn't have any kind of problems with me going to Serbia during the election campaign and meeting the Hungarian community. No problem. Well, Romanians have no problem with that. Slovakia has no problem
to participate in electoral campaigns.
Slovakia had no problems with that, and you know, we had very challenging periods of relationship with all these countries, but we both understood that it's much better to build common success stories and respect each other and respect reality than accusing each other. Ukrainian political elite cannot deny that there are 150,000 Hungarians living on the territory of Ukraine. They are loyal citizens of Ukraine, but they are Hungarians. This is a reality, and denying that, it's not very nice.
Nobody denies that.
And you know, there are international regulations which say that there must be a free access of contact with the minorities living on the territories of other countries. So OSCE, UN, even Council of Europe do have their declarations on ensuring that there's a free access in this kind of relationship. And you know, I don't think the Ukrainian government should react like that, because encouraging the Hungarians living on the territory of Ukraine to take part on elections, I don't think it's something that would be against the interest of Ukraine.
So you admit that you participated in Ukrainian electoral campaign?
Sorry?
So you admit that you participated in Ukrainian electoral campaign supporting candidates from Hungarian community?
Number one, I was invited to come. I was invited by a member of your national parliament to come. This is number one. And you have to respect that. Regardless that he is Hungarian, he's a member of the Ukrainian parliament. And he invited me to come. Why shouldn't I come? Look at Ukraine would like to come closer to European Union, right? Look at the electoral campaigns in the European Union. Look at how many countries invite other politicians to come. Even in Hungary, on our rallies, we have foreign visitors from the European People's Party. The socialists do have foreign visitors from their party group. On one of the recent elections, Victor Ponta, that time Prime Minister of Romania, came and took part on a rally of the Socialist Party. We had no problem with it. Why should we have a problem with that?
Well, you mentioned about the invitation. Yet there was an invitation from Ukrainian MFA. They wanted you to visit Kiev first.
There was no invitation. That's a lie. There was no invitation.
There's no invitation.
It's a lie.
It's a lie.
It's a lie. There was no invitation to me. There was no invitation to me to come to Kiev. How would there be an invitation? You don't have a foreign minister.
Well,
I didn't receive any kind of invitation.
There is acting foreign minister now.
But I didn't receive any kind of invitation from him.
So the presidential office did not recommend you to visit Kiev first and then go together to Transcarpathia. There was no such statement.
Our ambassador went to see the acting foreign minister one day before my visit, right, when he mentioned that I should have come to Kiev and then he would have come together with me to Transcarpathia. But if I don't have such kind of an invitation, how could I come? I would be very happy to host your upcoming foreign minister, because for me what matters is rather the future and not the past, you know. And if we get stuck in the past and we make a list of, you know, painful things, I think it's not helpful from the perspective of the future. So I'm here, I'm ready. I would have even wanted to meet the governor of Transcarpathia, but I understood for some reason he couldn't meet me. But we really would like to have a good cooperation with the Ukrainian government, with the upcoming Ukrainian government, with the Ukrainian president, with Ukraine itself. And if Ukrainian political elite looks at the Hungarian community as a source of strength from the perspective of the bilateral relationship, that would be much better. We had very challenging times with Serbia, for example. And then we started to look at, the Serbs also started to look at the Hungarian community as a community which connects us and not divides us. And since then we have a historic friendship. And I hope something similar with Ukraine. I will do my best to do so. You know, once again, we made all positive gestures. We're happy to continue. We're happy to put this relationship on a pragmatic track. We're happy to cooperate on economy, on politics. We were the loudest supporters of the EU-Ukraine association agreement to enter into force. We were the loudest supporters of the visa-free regime for Ukraine to enter into force. So you see that we are very friendly people, and we really do hope that this relationship will come back to the track of friendship.
Friendly people, but when it comes to language or like law of education, like different positions. So like in terms of law, like this language law, which came into force just yesterday during your visit to Transcarpathia incident, still before when there was an educational law, you decided to block Ukrainian-NATO dialogue. Now there is new issue for you. So will there be any response on that, or like language law, or what response?
Look,
does Hungary have?
I like the fact-based debates, so no emotions. Because if you have emotions in the debates, they lead nowhere. They lead nowhere. So we have made it very clear to your former president. I myself made it very clear to Pavlo Klimkin, whom I respect very much. And I think, regardless of the difference, we were able to create such kind of a political friendship. At least we met 18 times, so you know, we had time to get acquainted. We made very clear what chapters, what regulations are violating the rights of the Hungarians, what chapters take away already existing rights from the Hungarians, and we had a clear request not to do so. And please give back those rights to the Hungarians. And immediately, if these things are repaired, we are happy to lift the veto regarding the convening of the NATO-Ukraine Commission. You can imagine that we don't like this situation. We don't like these developments in our bilateral relations. We would be happy to come back to a supporting position, as we used to be before, when it comes to your European and Euro-Atlantic endeavors. But I mean, you have to give back. I mean, not you. Sorry, Ukraine does have to give back those rights to the Hungarians, which used to exist.
Often, Hungary has been criticized for its negative attitude towards migrants, towards multiculturalism, and the aspiration to keep the homogeneous society. Well, like before in your interviews and like Mr. Orban's interviews, you say that that's an internal issue of the country. And like there's a quote from your interview to CNN. Let's leave this decision to the country, how it would like to continue its life. So just to clarify, so when it comes to Hungary, it's internal policy. When it comes to Ukrainian language law, it's violation of human rights, minorities.
But how can you confuse illegal migration with a community which had been living there for a long time?
Multiculturalism and like internal issues.
Look, the Hungarians have not moved. They had been living there for centuries, so they are not migrants.
That's true. I'm not.
They are not migrants. You shouldn't confuse such kind of things. What we say is that making decision about whether a country would like to receive migrants or not is a national competence, and no one from New York, from Brussels, or Geneva should take over the right to make a decision about that. We clearly represent an anti-migration policy. We clearly say that the only way to come to Hungary is a legal way, and we will never receive any kind of illegal migrants on the territory of our country, regardless of any kind of pressure being put on us. But those Hungarians who have been living in Ukraine had been living there always.
Yes, I know that.
And there are international regulations which say that the already existing rights of the minorities should not be taken away. That's why our humble request towards the Ukrainian administration is to give back those rights which already existed and were taken away. We don't ask for any kind of extra rights. We don't ask for any kind of additional rights to be given to the Hungarians. Just repair this thing and put it where it used to be. That's, I think, very simple.
One question. Is Stephen Bannon in regular connection with Hungarian leadership? Is he an informal advisor, let's say?
I didn't get the name.
Steve Bannon.
Sorry. We don't have any kind of special relationship with him. He was invited to come to Hungary to a conference, as far as I remember, but no official or no special, no any kind of relationship. We consider him as an exciting personality, since he was involved here in the election campaign, and whoever is being deeply involved in an election campaign in the number one superpower of the world must be an exciting one, must be exciting to listen to. But that's it.
Probably the last question. Are you comfortable with the broadly shared Western perspective, an opinion of Hungary as a tool of Kremlin's interests throughout Europe?
Well, that's a serious insult, I have to tell you. And I have to be serious. It's a serious insult. We are a sovereign country which has suffered for 40 years under communism. We are a country where people have died for freedom. We are a country which had the revolution in 1956, and no one came to help us. And we are a country which puts a lot of emphasis on sovereignty and integrity, and feels solidarity with other countries which struggle in this regard. So such kind of accusations clearly show me a disrespect towards my country and the nation. These kind of accusations are serious insults, and I don't think that that if there's a respect towards each other, then such kind of statements should be made.